Representative Ilhan Omar is receiving backlash from both sides of the aisle for recent comments in which she grouped the U.S. and Israel with terrorist groups. Let's throw her tweet up on the screen. You can see it right there. The Congresswoman said, "We must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crimes against humanity. We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S., Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban." Ryan, I think that was misstated. I wonder if she would actually take it back. She has since defended it, but I wonder if she would say that maybe differently if she could. What do you think? Do you think she actually intended to have that sort of equivalence? And would you defend the equivalence if you were her?
Yes, of course. I mean, the right on this wants to have it both ways. You know, they want to go around when they can trigger the left and say all lives matter. But then when it comes to victims of U.S. imperialism, of whom there are probably tens of millions in the second half of the 20th century, all of a sudden lives are different. Some lives matter. If you were taken by an enemy, if you're a life that was taken by an enemy of the United States, if you fell at the hands of communists or terrorists, then your life mattered. If you are an Indonesian member of the Communist Party there and you're one of the 500,000 to 1 million people annihilated in that genocide, that U.S.-backed genocide, then your life doesn't matter. I don't understand, maybe you can help explain it to me, how it is anti-Semitic to talk about American history in an accurate way.
Well, I don't think this comment is particularly anti-Semitic
they're coming after her. Like
I'm not.
According to John Bresnahan with Punchbowl.
Even Democrats.
Jewish Democrats in the House, he reported, are putting together or working on a statement calling her anti-Semitic for making this argument.
I mean, I think her all about the Benjamins tweet is still the clearest example that there may be anti-Semitism lurking in her worldview. But I would also say, in this case, when you include the United States with Israel in the equivalence between the Taliban and Hamas, I think it's clearly not targeted in the way that a charge of anti-Semitism would say. I do think it's extremely offensive to the establishment. I agree in this case because I think the Taliban and Hamas are forces for evil, and where you say the United States has also been a force of evil, that there are victims of United States imperialism, I think what that does is wash over people that the United States has saved through its actions. There is two sides to that, right? There are, I can admit, absolutely, of course, there are victims.
But try to say the same thing and say, well, Hamas builds hospitals and schools, and the
Taliban
and the Taliban eradicated a lot of corruption around Afghanistan, and the Soviet Union raised living standards throughout. So if we're going to do this thing, well, okay, yes, it's true that U.S. imperialism killed tens of millions of people, but they also did good things. Then why does that only apply to the U.S. and not to all of these other countries, the evil empire? Because
the level of good, I think, that the United States has had around the world is wildly out. The balance there between good and bad is nowhere where it is compared to the Taliban.
You would have a hard time making that case in most countries where the U.S. intervened.
Right. No, I understand that completely, but that doesn't change my viewpoint, and I don't think it changes the facts that the balance of good and bad worldwide over the course of the United States' existence, it's silly to whitewash the bad. It's absolutely silly to whitewash bad. There has been plenty of it. But on the other side, on the balance, I think the United States has done incredible good around the world, continues to do incredible good around the world in a way that could never and should never be compared with the Taliban or Hamas.
I would agree in this sense that when it comes to the amount of pain and suffering that the U.S. has produced around the world, the Taliban, Hamas, and Israel are pikers compared to what the U.S. has been able to accomplish just in, say, Argentina, or just in Indonesia, or just in Vietnam, or just in Congo, or just you could throw a dart anywhere at the global map, and you can probably find, at some point throughout the 20th century, the U.S. intervening to undermine some type of social democratic effort and backing the most vicious right-wing elements. And the irony of them calling this anti-Semitism when the U.S. very consciously and explicitly out of World War II allied itself with former Nazis, helped Nazis escape justice, was complicit in what was called the rat line, with getting Nazis out of Germany and into these death squads that were run by the United States and deployed in an anti-communist fashion against the Soviet Union and against leftist elements in South America.
But who ended the Holocaust? I mean, what country?
The Soviet Union, actually.
Okay, but
I mean, the Soviet Union did that.
No,
we walked in after the Russians had suffered 20+ million casualties and marched into Germany.
Sure, but without the United States' intervention, a heck of a lot more people would have died in that atrocity.
Yes, and I'm glad the Soviet Union and the United States allied to beat Nazi Germany, but the Nazi Germany, the Nazis themselves then allied with the United States to go after the Soviet Union and to go after communist and social democratic elements in South America. That's an actual part of the history.
Right, but again, there's lives being saved in that process, a lot of lives being saved in that process, and a lot of Americans putting their lives on the line and dying to save those lives.
Sure, but many fewer than Soviet lives died to take on the Nazis.
But that doesn't change the fact that the United States intervened and risked lots and lots of lives compared to what it may have been complicit in or what it may have been, lives it may have costed on the other side of that. I think, again, the balance there is clearly on the side of good in a way that you can't apply to the Taliban or Hamas. I would much rather have I would take the establishment government of the United States over the governing forces and the establishment of the Taliban any day. I'm glad we're in the American empire, not the Taliban empire.
Wait till you hear who funded the Taliban at the very beginning.
Well, there is that. That's not a bad point, Ryan. Ryan says he thinks the Congresswoman was giving an overly generous view of U.S. history. Here's his tweet. This is basically what we just discussed.
Yeah, and I mean, no, this is maybe it's not that right exactly. So my point there is that if you actually tallied up the body count and if you said all lives matter, that the U.S. death count is orders of magnitude higher than the other three countries that she lumped them with. So in that sense, I would say it's unfair to those other countries.
Which is exactly what we just worked through in terms of tallying things up.
All right, Emily. Tomorrow on Rising, David Sirota is here, and Matt Stoller explains why it's time to break up the Ivy League. Team Rising will also be in the house.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Next week, we're welcoming Emily Miller and Colin Ruggiero to the show. The rotation is continuing. They're picking up the baton here as your hosts for that week in this exciting new era for Hill TV.
We'll see you tomorrow. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. Hope you have a great weekend.